Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. This particular section will be over Chapter 7, Section 3, about the Federalists and Anti-Federalists and how the Constitution became ratified. Okay, first off, we have the nation's leaders. They had written a new plan of government, but it could not yet be put in place. This was the Constitution. It had to be approved by the states, and approval was far from certain. So again, September 17th, 1787, the Constitution is written, it's signed. However, it has to be ratified or approved by the states. Delegates from each state can't approve such an important document just by themselves. The process for the states to ratify the new Constitution had been set up by the delegates in Philadelphia. This is during the convention. Again, each state would hold a convention. The Constitution takes effect when approved by 9 states. So again, 9 states had to approve, the wording of the Constitution. And again, 9 states, that comes out to 69.2%. From the beginning, Americans were divided over whether to support the new Constitution and its strong national or federal government. Federalists favored ratification. Anti-Federalists were against ratification. James Madison was a leading Federalist. Madison and others argued that a strong national government was needed for the Union to survive. Again, he's remembering Shays' Rebellion. He's remembering each state having their own money, each state setting up their own trade barriers. He remembers, Spain blocking trade on the Mississippi River. So he's very much in favor of this new Constitution in order for the country to survive. At that time, the national government could not enforce its own laws. Remember, there was no executive branch. Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay explained their support for the Constitution in a series of newspaper articles that drew wide attention. These articles were called the Federalist Papers. So for the better part of a year, these are essays that are written encouraging people to vote in support of this new Constitution. George Mason and Patrick Henry were among anti-Federalist leaders who argued that the new national government would have too much power. So again, when they read the Constitution of the States, Constitution of the United States, they felt it would weaken the states. It was too powerful. They said there was no Bill of Rights in there. Each state had a Bill of Rights, but they were concerned that the federal government would feel it might not have to protect individual rights. They wanted that Bill of Rights included. And they felt that the president could become a king. The debate over the Constitution intensified as the states began to hold their ratifying conventions. Delaware was the first to ratify, followed quickly by Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, and Connecticut. A close vote was expected in Massachusetts, where hard feelings still lingered from Shays' Rebellion. Again, the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists certainly fought a hard battle there, but a final push by Federalists helped win the state. Again, Maryland and South Carolina followed. 8 of the 9 states needed had now approved the Constitution. Attention turned toward Virginia. A no vote in this large, powerful state could trigger no votes elsewhere. Despite the arguments of Patrick Henry and Anti-Federalists, Virginia approved the Constitution in a narrow vote. While Virginia debated, however, a 9th state ratified the Constitution. Again, this was New Hampshire. In time, the remaining states, New York, North Carolina, and Rhode Island, also voted to ratify. The new government could now be put in place. George Washington was elected president. John Adams was elected vice president. Remember, now that the Constitution was ratified, we had to actually do what it said. That meant we have an executive branch. Well, we have to come up with what the executive branch calls for, etc. A new Congress was elected too, and one of its first tasks was to take up the question most debated during the ratification process, whether to add a Bill of Rights to the new Constitution. The first Congress passed a series of amendments to the Constitution listing individual rights. In 1791, 10 amendments were ratified by the states. So this is years later after the Constitution was ratified. The Bill of Rights, after much debate and discussion, again, was not only ratified but added. The Bill of Rights, again, or any other amendment that's a permanent change to the Constitution. It's very difficult to change a Constitution. Think of it like a tattoo. It's not something that you would just peel right off. If you're going to glue an amendment to the Constitution, you couldn't tear off the amendment without ripping the whole Constitution. So it's a permanent change. A quick summary of the Bill of Rights. The first, think RAPS: freedom of religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech. Petition would mean the ability to ask the government to correct a perceived wrong that it's done. The second would be the right to bear arms. The right to bear arms isn't for hunting. It's not for private self-defense. It's what Jefferson wrote in the Declaration, that the people have the right to change or abolish that form of government that proves itself to be tyrannical. So the power would be kept in the hands of the people through weaponry. The third would prohibit quartering of troops in private homes. That goes back to General Gage during the American Revolution and having a military commander in charge of a town. The public would never be forced to house and be taxed for troops living in their own personal homes. The fourth would protect people from unreasonable searches and seizures. This too is in line with the American Revolution. Think of the writs of assistance, these blank search warrants that England used to search the colonists' home. Fifth was due process for all accused persons. The government has to follow an order. It can't just go from step A to step F all at once. It has to give you your rights that are guaranteed to you under the law. The sixth guarantees a right to a speedy and a public trial in the state where the offense was committed. Speedy means, relatively soon. You can't be put in jail for 2 years, and it has to be public. The seventh guarantees a right to a jury trial for civil cases in federal courts. The eighth would prohibit excessive bail and cruel and unusual punishment. Bail would be being put in jail and your court case will not be the next day. Instead of sitting in jail, you could go home, albeit that you put up a sum of money, to the court. Excessive, you couldn't have $1 million bail if you jaywalked across the street. That would be excessive. That would be an example. The Ninth Amendment would provide that people have rights beyond those stated in the Constitution. That's why in America you can have purple hair. In my case, no hair. Again, you have those rights. The 10th Amendment would be powers not granted to the national government belong to the states and to the people. So if it's not written in the Constitution, it's thus reserved to the states to determine, such as education, such as driving, voting, etc. Again, to summarize, the first 4 amendments protect citizens from possible abuses by the federal government. The next 4 amendments protect people who are accused of crimes. And then the last 2 limit the power of the federal government. Thanks for listening. Feel free to review if you need to.